John is a 21-year-old university student. He's come to the end of his second year and feels that he has to drop out. When he spoke to his rather demanding parents, who just wanted him to continue, he said, "I can't do it. I'm just too anxious." His father tried to help and say, "Well, everyone gets anxious around exam times." But John had been so anxious that he'd actually stopped going to lectures, just in case he couldn't remember what the lecturer was saying. Then he stopped going into the university coffee shop, just in case he bumped into one of his tutors. He became more and more withdrawn. His life and his thinking was all about what ifs, thinking of the worst. Anxiety is a bit like worry, except anxiety at its most serious can be very, very debilitating. John didn't really know what to do with all of this anxiousness. It had changed his whole life. So what did he do? What was the solution for John? First of all, he had to become really aware of what he was feeling, to really understand what was going on inside him, what was imaginary and what was not. Who was John actually living his life for? Was he anxious about pleasing his parents or being successful? He was doing a business studies course, his father was a businessman, and all of this was causing a great deal of angst. John really felt that he wanted to be creative and use the creative part of who he was. And after getting some help and some coaching and maybe some counselling as well, John decided that instead of doing something to please everyone else, he would try to use the gifts that he had within himself. And even the most anxious person has got gifts and skills and abilities, sometimes yet untapped. Sometimes talking to people to explore what's going on inside can help us to be less anxious. One other thing that we can do is just try and live in the present moment. Your whole life is not going to happen within this next minute or two. Live in the now. Try to tap in to the creative energy that you have inside yourself. Have a wee bit of faith. And I'm not talking about blind faith, but have faith and belief, maybe in yourself, maybe in a power greater than yourself, maybe in a God. Prayer and meditation can really help with anxiety. You may not have spiritual beliefs, but meditating and even praying. I know many atheists that pray just because it's good for the mind. It may seem foolish, but try it. See what happens. And slowly but surely, as you start to have faith in yourself, living in the present moment, and maybe recognizing that you come through the other side of anxiety when you take care of you, when you stop worrying about what everyone else thinks and trying to people please, or thinking about every disaster that's around the corner. Instead, if we can try and change that, and positive thinking on its own doesn't really help, but if we can try and explore what's really going on inside us, maybe we have to challenge those parts of us that are constantly negative, not in a harsh way, but maybe we need to have compassion even in those parts of ourselves that cause us to have that kind of negativity. Often we are trying to cover up our own vulnerability, and yet all of us are vulnerable. All of us feel vulnerable at some time in our lives, and maybe we should start to embrace some of that vulnerability. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be anxious sometimes. Anxiety is actually needed in the human being. So even in the animal kingdom, it's very clear that being a bit anxious works. So let's think about the antelope in the Serengeti. nonchalantly eating away at the grass. And out of the corner of its eye, it notices the lion. And what does it do? Does it sit and ponder and consider? No. Immediately adrenaline and cortisol flood into the body and it's off and running. And let's say it escapes, as most of them do. After 10 or 15 minutes, if you ever watch any of these Horizon programs or wildlife programs on television, you'll notice that the antelope will give a wee shudder and its body's coming back in to equilibrium. Human beings, however, can often hold memory, sometimes in the subconscious, and something happens and it triggers this anxiety. Sometimes our imagination can cause us more anxiety than what is real. So get to know the difference, what I'm imagining and what is real. And you know, it's good to imagine, but maybe we should start thinking of what we should be imagining. Everything that's good, everything that's noble. What are you grateful for? Grateful for all of these things can help to reduce anxiety. Learning to breathe, live in the present moment, pray, meditate, these are all helpful things. And finding someone to talk to also helps. Thank you.